Okay, so we've done what? Equivalent rational expressions. We've done simplifying simplest form, and now it's multiplying and dividing. Tomorrow we will quiz those three sections, plus maybe one of the sections we did yesterday, or sorry, last week. So it'll be in 302, period 3, usual. I'll send out a remind, maybe, just to remind you. When we're doing quizzes, make sure you look at all sides of the paper. I mean, I've had people hand stuff in and there's like a blank side, and it's just weird. So it's like, how do you miss the back side of the first page, but you do the other three sides, right? Really strange. Anyways, so steps multiplying. Number one, completely factor all numerators and all denominators, right? Wow, that's yesterday's first step, right? You got to factor everything. Step two, from the factored form, you're going to state the restrictions from the denominators. So state restrictions. Okay, and those come from the denominators. Numerator is okay if it's 0. Step 3. Divide out the common factors between numerator and denominator. So any numerator factor with any denominator factor can be divided out. Okay, so divide out any common factors. Divide out any common factors between numerators and denominators. And you can cross the multiplication sign when you do that. And step 4 is to express it as a single rational expression. So express the result as a single rational expression. So that's multiplying. If we want to divide, then we have a couple of different things, a couple of additional steps. So dividing, first step is change division into multiplication by multiplying by the reciprocal, right? You may have heard this when you're doing fractions, it's like kiss and flip or something. Okay, so step 1, so before you do anything else, if you see it as a division, you change division to multiplication. By multiplying by the reciprocal. And then you do the steps for multiplying. And follow the steps for multiplying. And there's one additional place to look for restrictions. Okay, so make note of that. And I'll show you as we get into it. And we do want to say, okay, now when you're doing restrictions, you have to look here. You got to look in 3 places. Okay, so normally with just a multiply, you've got like a over b times c over d. You're just looking at b and d. You're looking at the denominators. When you divide, you have to look in 3 places. Okay, and there'll be a question. I will write one this weekend. I will tell you now. I shall write a question this weekend where it's asking for restrictions and it's a divide, and you got to look in 3 places. Okay, so you'll see that. Kind of thing, right? Just really, it's just a very simple restriction question. And some of the questions on the diploma are you're going to look at it and go, really, no, like that's too easy, and it is, right? There really are some just really straightforward questions. They're not a trick. Don't look at it and say that's way too easy to be on a diploma exam. It must be a trick. Okay, it's not. It just is an easy, straightforward question, right? Because there's people elsewhere in the province who just really need those really easy, straightforward questions to get anywhere, okay? And so there is some stuff on there that is just very basic stuff, okay? So don't, and there's some where you are doing 5 or 6 steps of work, right? Where you actually have to do a lot of work. So they're not all created equal in a sense. They're all marked equally, but they're not all equal work, right? Some you just look at and say, like, the answer's 13, and I'm done. And other ones, it's like I got to get out the calculator and I need to run a regression, and I've got to go through all these steps. Okay. Number 1, simplify. So the instructions for simplifying and for adding and subtract, multiplying and dividing will be simplify. The instructions for adding and subtracting will be simplify. Okay, and it's only in the last section where we actually solve, it'll say solve this rational expression, right? You actually have to come up with an answer. Otherwise, simplify, just, and what does that mean? Factor everything. And we will say state all restrictions. You may not get that on a test. Okay, so it may not ask you for restrictions, in which case you don't have to state them, and it may give you restrictions on certain things where it's just asking you to do something else, and it may ask you for restrictions. So just be aware that you might have to state the restrictions. Okay, so let's do a bunch. A, 2x over x plus 4 times 3x times x minus 4 over 5x minus 1. Okay, so nice easy one to start off with, right? It's in factored form. It's already been factored, so we don't have to do step 1, right? There's nothing to factor here. So we're going to start off by stating restrictions. So what are the restrictions? So x cannot equal negative 4, right? So we look here, this denominator, so x can't be negative 4. And 1 over 5. So we look here. Oh, I don't think I showed you the easy way, right? So what's the way? You know that 5x minus 1 equals 0. That's a non-permissible value, right? I'm not allowed to have 5x minus 1 equal to 0, which means 5x is 1 and x is 1/5, and then change that to a restriction where it says x is not allowed to, right? X cannot be equal to 1/5. So the easy way of doing that is you take this number here, you change its sign, and you put it over this, okay? So take the constant term, in this case negative 1, change its sign, make it positive 1, and put it over the 5. Okay? Because what's happening? You're moving the negative 1 over, so it changes sign, right? When it changes sides, it changes signs, and then you're dividing by the number in front. Okay? So if you see 3x minus 2, what would the restriction be for that? 2/3, right? Change the sign, positive 2 divided by 3. So that's how you can, check restrictions. And if you have time and you're not really sure, then, plug 1/5 into that. Go 5 times the 5th minus 1. Okay, if you get 0, then. All right, any other restrictions? What about, like, x can't be 0? How come that's not a restriction? Yeah, it's a numerator, right? Numerators can be 0, right? You know 0 divided by something, it's just 0. That's allowed. Okay, so it's only denominator. All right, what cancels? Nothing, right? That's it. Nothing that cancels. All we can do on this one is state restriction. So, can't be that. What you could do, though, if we want to express it as a single, is to go, okay, this is 6x squared times x minus 4 over x plus 4, 5x minus 1. So expressed as a single rational expression, okay, I will collect those two together, get 6x squared, right, multiply, times x minus 4 over this, and that's it. B. Okay, let's do a division. 2x squared over 5. Okay. Actually, I think all we're doing here really is just stating restriction. So we need to turn this into a multiply, right? So it's 2x squared over 5 times what? 3x plus 1 over x cubed. What are the restrictions? So x cannot be 0. Is that it? Negative 1/3. So when we do a divide, here's the denominator, right? These two guys here. But this was a denominator, right? So it can't be 0. We can't have any values of x that would make this 0 before we change the division, because then you're going to go divided by undefined. Right? You can't do that either, right? You can't divide by 0, but you can't divide by something that's undefined. So you need to, when you're doing division, you're going to need to look in 3 places. Here, here, and here. So there's no restriction there, there's no variable. This is a denominator, and this is going to become a denominator, right? Or this is a denominator, this is a denominator, and this was a denominator, so it has to be checked. Okay? So you need to look in the one place you don't look is up here. Okay? You don't need to look up there. Okay, and simplified, it's really just 2x squared times 3x plus 1 over 5x cubed. And so we can do a little simplifying, right? X squared takes this down to an x. So it's 2 times 3x plus 1 over 5x. Okay, and that's your simplified form. And these are your restrictions, right? So they hold. And if you want, I mean, you can simplify a step earlier. You can go up here and just say, well, x squared, and that's an x cubed, so I'm just left with an x at that point, right? You can cancel any factor in either numerator with either denominator. So I can cancel something that's in the upper left with something that's in the lower right, just as long as it's top and bottom. Okay, C, 15x. Okay, so we are multiplying. Nothing factored just yet, right? But there's a restriction. What's the restriction? So x can't be 0. Okay, what do we get? Well, we're going to get 30x squared. So when you see 2x, you can think of it as 2x over 1, right? Like if it doesn't have, if it's not written as a rational expression, you can just put it over 1. Over 25x squared. The x squareds cancel. And you're left with 30 over 25, which reduces to 6 over 5. Okay, so any fraction should be reduced, right? Like don't write it as 30 over 25, write it as 6 over 5. Okay, so what do we got? Negative 3x quantity squared over 10x cubed divided by 27x. Why don't you work that? Okay, and here's the solution. Keep going. 24m over 36m squared. Okay, again, fairly straightforward stuff. They're not really going to ask you on this question, what are the restrictions? Because restriction is just kind of obvious, right? It's just m cannot equal 0. You got two choices as far as doing this, right? Or you can just multiply it out, get 72m squared over that 180 m to the 5th. If you want to reduce a fraction on your calculator, just go 72 divided by 180, hit the math key and hit enter twice. And what that'll do, so 72 divided by 180, if you hit enter, will give you a decimal. When you hit the math key and you hit enter twice, that's the command to the calculator to convert a decimal to a fraction. Okay, and that's what you want. I want this as the fraction, right? So you can go 72 divided by 180, hit math, hit enter twice, and it'll give you the reduced fraction, which is what, 2/5? Okay, so you got 2/5, and I've got this m is bigger by 3. Okay, so m squared, m to the 5th. You go with the bigger one, subtract the smaller from the larger, that's where it's going to be. So the larger is in the bottom. So it's 2 over 5m cubed. Okay? So any numbers you want, so there's no excuse for not reducing a fraction number-wise, right? You got a calculator, just plug it in, hit math, hit enter twice, nice reduced fraction comes. Okay? Otherwise, you could do it in place, so I'm just going to show you here. So I could just say, all right, I got an m here and an m here and an m squared, right? So m times m is m squared. I cross off these two m's and this, or even 3 goes into 36 12 times, 12 goes into 24 twice. So I got a 2 up top and I got a 5m cubed on the bottom. Okay. Now the only problem with canceling that way is sometimes you kind of lose some of the numbers. You might not see them. You might not see that you still have a variable here, which we don't, but you know, so you might lose stuff and not see it. That could be the only danger with that. Okay, negative 4p squared. Okay, what's first step? Change it to multiplication, right? So step 1, change to multiplication. So it becomes negative 4p squared over 6a times 9p over 5p to the 4th. State your restrictions. How many places are we looking for restrictions? 3. So what are you going to say about this? A can't be 0. How about this? What are you going to write? Not going to write 0. What's that mean? Yeah.
It's my mom. She came pick me up.
Oh.
But the reception said you could call her.
Yeah, no. Okay, so A cannot equal 0, P cannot equal 0. You write restriction and you just say can equal 0 or something, that's what your mark will equal, right? Because it can equal 0. You got to write something like X cannot equal 0, not just cannot equal 0. So you want to bet? All right, and you know, on the diploma itself, you're gonna get like one restriction question. I'm pretty sure. Right? We're not gonna waste a lot of time testing restrictions, but we will test restrictions. Okay, and then now we can multiply it out. So we've got negative 36p cubed over 30a p to the fourth. So you want to reduce your fraction, negative 36 over 30. And you can recognize, okay, 6 goes into both, and it's going to be negative 6 over 5. Or you can use your calculator, right? Got an a on the bottom, and I got a p on the bottom, right? That's p to the fourth p cubed, so one more p on the bottom, then up top. Negative 6 up here, and a 5 down there. So negative 6 over 5ap. Okay, again, with this restriction in place. Yep.
If you have two different variables at the bottom, does it matter what order they go in?
Alphabetical. And no, but alphabetical generally. It makes it easy because you're comparing with somebody else, and you know you got like 6 variables, and you know you're looking at I've got A B C D E F, and I've got F E C D B E. Right. So if we just go for alphabetical, would be it's likely what you're going to see. Okay, let's do some real simplifying. So actual simplifying. Let's say actually simplifying. Okay, so step 1 is to factor. Is there anything to factor there? I invited them in, they were actually having fun. Anything to factor? No. Restrictions? Negative 6 and 0. Okay. I don't care what order you put them in, but if you see them listed on the exam or in a textbook or that, they will be generally from lowest to highest, right? So negative 6, comma 0. You want to list them as 0, comma negative 6, that's fine. If you throw this in, it's wrong. Okay. Not the 1/3, it's not a restriction. So if you put too many restrictions in, you're going to lose any marks that are worth for finding restriction. Okay. So you won't get like 4 out of 4. Get one restriction wrong, you'd be 3.5. Okay, now what? So it's factored. Start crossing stuff off. So is there anything top and bottom that could be crossed off? So is x plus 6 the same as 6 plus x? Yeah, because it doesn't matter what order you add things in, right? We got to watch out for if we've got x minus 4, if we see 4 minus x, it's, well, wait a sec, yeah, they're the same, but they have opposite signs when we cross them off. So these guys we just straight cross off, right? Yeah. You're identical. Now at this point we may want to say, okay, what have I got left? So I've got 28x times 3x minus 1 over 7x squared, no, sorry, over 56x to the fourth. Okay, so we've kind of taken out the obvious, right? It's like, all right, I'm getting rid of the 6 plus x and the x plus 6, and now I've got to reduce 28x times 3x minus 1 over 56x to the fourth. So what are we going to get? think that's what you're going to get. Is that what you got? Yeah. Okay, so 28 goes into 56 twice, right? So you cross off the 28, the 56, put a 2 down. We got an x on the top, but an x to the 4th on the bottom. So we just go with which one's larger power, x to the 4th, how much larger, by 3, and we write x cubed, right? So 2x cubed. Okay, so there's a problem. First step is factor, but there's nothing to factor, right? It's in a factored form. Good news is you're not going to do a lot of factoring on the test. There will be a few questions where you have to factor. So what's our first step then? If it's actually whether it's factored or not, what's our first step? Change it to a multiply, right? So you can't work with division. You got to change it to a multiply. So 8. We're just going to rewrite it. What's the next step? Yes. Yep. Yep. Sure. Yeah, no worries. Okay. Bye. You're gonna go see Ms. Renault. Next step. What do we do? Restrictions. Okay. What can't T be? I don't have any big problems with -1. How many places are we looking? 3. Okay. What can't it be here? Okay, make that positive and put it over that. So positive 3/4. What can't it be here? Okay. You'd have to make it look like that. It's still positive 3/4. Right. If I put positive 3/4 there, then it's going to be 3 minus 3. Right. 3/4 times 4. 4 times 3/4 is 3. You'll get 3 minus 3. What can't it be here? -1/4. Okay. So if they're written differently, then you may have to just go and work it out sort of separately, right? Separate sheet, or just somewhere on the paper, just set aside a little slice on the side of the paper and just work them out separately. Okay, anything cross off top and bottom? Okay, so we can look at these guys, we can say, hey, so got a positive 4t minus 3, and I got a positive 3 minus 4t. Remember what we do with those? Cross those off, but we put a -1 here, right? So they're the same, but they have opposite signs. So if I cancel them, I just have to make sure that I put a -1. And really what it's like doing is this, is just putting a negative sign in front of the 3 minus 4t. And then that becomes -3 plus 4t, or 4t minus 3. Now it's the same as this, right? So I put a negative in front, I change all the signs, so when I cancel them, I just have to put that negative in there. Anything else? What about 4t plus 1, 1 plus 4t? Do we just cross them off and put a negative? Just cross them off, they're the same thing, right? Because we're adding. When you cross something off, just write a 1 in. Okay, what do we got? So we got 8 times 1 times -1 is -8. And we got a 4 on the bottom there. So it's just going to be negative 2. Okay, just negative 2. Question? Nope. Okay, do a few more. All right, so this we have to factor, right? And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 expressions that must be factored. Okay, so we have to factor each numerator, 2a squared minus 8a, a squared minus 4. Got to factor each denominator, 6a plus 12, 5a minus 20. So 2a is my common factor. When you factor, you do two things. Sure. You just check, right? So 2a squared minus 8a. Also check in here. Did I leave any common factors? No. Okay, so I've got everything out of there. 6. And I got a plus 2. Again, check. 6a plus 12. Okay, that's good. This one, oh yeah, that's a difference of squares, right? It's going to be a plus 2, a minus 2. And this one is just a common factor. So it's going to be 5 times a minus 4. So 4 expressions, all of which factor, and all of which must be factored. Okay. Get used to the difference of squares. That's one you're going to see. You're going to see a factoring and difference of squares. Okay. And if you miss it, it just makes things really bad. Right? You end up multiplying by it. You can't figure out restrictions. Okay, what are the restrictions? Now that we have the factored form, restrictions are a cannot equal negative 2 or positive 4. Okay, we're only looking 2 places, right? So as a multiply to begin with, we just have to worry about the denominators. It can't be negative 2, can't be positive 4. And then we just go on a spree, right? Like, woohoo, stuff's crossing off all over the place here. Okay, so what have I got left? Now, there's still more canceling I could do, but I'm not going to do it just yet. I'm just going to say, all right, yeah, we've taken out the big stuff. So I've got 2a times 1 times 1 times a minus 2. So I have 2a times a minus 2. And on the bottom, I got 6 times 1 times 5 times 1, which is 30. And then I could say, oh, okay, the 2 goes into 30 15 times. So I get a times a minus 2 over 15, right? And that's your answer. Right? So factor all the expressions. State your restrictions, right? Because there's no restrictions on this. This has, you know, if this was all we had, there's no restriction here. But remember, this is the equivalent of this, right? If you plug in an a value and work all of this out, you can get the same answer by plugging the a value in here. It would be a lot easier, obviously, right? But you cannot put in an a value of negative 2 or positive 4. What's next? Yeah, it's on the testimony. Okay, step 1. What do we do first? Not factor. To divide, what do we do? Change it to multiply, right? So you're sitting there on the test where you're looking at it and say, this is divide. I got to change it to multiply before I do anything else. Okay, now that I've changed it to multiply, what do we do? Now we factor. How many expressions are we going to factor here? Only 2 to factor, right? I mean, the 10x cubed and the x to the 4th. So we got 10x cubed. I've got, what is it, 2x squared? Anytime you factor, just check and make sure, right? Make sure that I don't have an x on this and an x on here, right? That I can't have like 3x squared minus 5x, and I would not have taken out the greatest common factor. Make sure this expands back out. 6x cubed minus 10x squared. Okay, that's good. Times 12 and 20 would be 4. And I need to get 12x, so that'll be 3x minus 5. Over x to the 4th. Restrictions? Anything else? 0. Okay. So where you're looking, right? It's a divide, so I've got to look here. So I generally just start down here, right? I say 0, 5/3. 5/3, 0. I'm looking in 3 places, right? Here, here, and here. Okay. Now it turns out that I've got them all here, right? Just 0 and 5/3. Don't write it down again. Once it's a restriction, you don't have to list it more than once. 5/3 there, 0 there. Okay, what do you want to cross off? Okay, 3x minus 5. Alright, now maybe we just collect the terms now. Okay, so I'm just going to go 40x cubed divided by 2x to the 6th. And then one last round. And we get 20 over what? X to the 3rd, right? X cubed. Don't worry, it's like 2 more. Yeah.
Do you have to have scissors?
A scissor. Like I'd have to break them in half.
A pair of scissors?
Sure. They do actually have a safety tip, but still. Yeah. Then you could listen to the video could go viral. You'd hear this and stab. Okay. What do you gotta do first? Factor. How many things are you gonna factor? More than 1 and less than 5. Okay, go ahead, factor. Okay, so there is our fully factored form. Okay, so the big, if there was a trick in there, I guess it's maybe the 2x squared minus 18, because that's 2 times x squared minus 9, and x squared minus 9 is a difference of squares. Okay. Once it's fully factored, we can then start stating restrictions. So the restriction here is what? Okay, so x cannot equal -3. This one, -3 again, +3, and this one, 0. That's the exact mark on restrictions, if that's what you write. 3/2. Okay, so it can't be -3 from here.
Yeah, but that's.
No, we don't actually go up here, do we? Man, who let me do that? So it's just 3 and 3/2. Okay, so this wasn't a divide. We don't want to go up here, right? So watch that. That's definitely going to be on the test, something like that. Okay, then we start canceling. What do we got? X plus 3, x plus 3. 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3. The 2 takes out the 4. What's left? Got 2x plus 3 and an x minus 3. They must be written in brackets. Okay, we got to be in parentheses, and on the bottom we've got a 2. All right, let's end there. I don't want to do that last one.